Today we're going to look at using Blender in a 2D environment. So we want to start out Blender and start out with a 2D animation environment. So we can go to File, New, and choose 2D Animation. Or we can start the program right up from the startup screen and choose 2D Animation. Now, this space is still a 3D space, but we're looking at it straight on from the Y direction. And it's got a white background, and there are a couple of things to know about the space in general. There is um, strokes that consist of two different layers, and if I look on the right hand side under scene collection here, we can see the stroke area under the collection, and in the stroke area there's two different current layers, lines and fills. And these are stacked visually, so the fills are always behind the lines. All right, then for those particular lines or fills, when we're drawing, we're going to use what are called materials. And currently at the top of the screen, we can see that there are four different materials that are associated with the program right now: solid stroke, square stroke, solid fill, and dot stroke. We also see that there's a brush associated with the particular drawing. We're in pencil mode right here, but there are several other kinds of brushes that we can use. There is a color, which may or may not be used based on, because the material is really sort of taking the precedent of that. There's a radius of the brush size, and that there's a strength value as well. And these are, if you have a tablet, the tablet can use the radius and the strength as pressure settings. Also, there are layers, and on my particular screen, the layers are sort of hidden on this top bar here. We can't really see the layers, and so we're going to look again in the stroke area to see the layer information there. That's where we're going to find the layer information. All right, so if we start on the lines layer, we can draw lines using our mouse, and we can see the result of those lines. Again, I can choose different brush styles. So if I do ink pen, for instance, I get a very specific look to that pen that's different from the pencil. Okay, now I can also set the radius. So if I do a larger radius, I can see a larger radius, and I can change the strength. So that is how strong that brush is. All right. Under the brush settings on the right-hand side, we can also see the color again, which is not going to be really applied because the material is taking on the aspect of it. Here we can see that the material is driving the color, not the color attribute. If I choose color attribute, then my colors will take over instead of materials. Okay, so I can choose which mode I want to work in. Usually it's best to stay with one or the other in a particular drawing. I'm going to stay with material. So these colors are not going to really apply to us at this point. So I can shrink the color area up. All right, now there's a bunch of tiny little icons down the right-hand side, and all the way down we see the material one, which looks like a little beach ball. We also, right above that, see the strokes, and there's our layers. And so between the beach ball, which is our materials, and the strokes, which are our layers, we can see the two different ways of working within the GreasePencil or 2D animation area. All right, so let's say I'm going to choose fills for my stroke. That means which layer I'm on. And for material, I'm going to go ahead and choose solid stroke. Let's see, solid fill here, solid fill. So here I see that solid fill is currently at gray with no stroke for that material. All right, so if I were to draw an object, what I get is a solid fill with no stroke. That means there's no edge to that line. If I draw another one, that other one gets sort of, overlaid or joined together. They all sort of blend together visually at one time. All right, so that's drawing on the fill layer. with the solid fill material. Now, if I change to the lines layer and change to the solid stroke, as I draw with a pencil, you see that the pencil gets sort of drawn on top of the fill. What that means is that these lines are always on top of the fill layer, regardless of what colors or anything I'm using. Now notice there are also little lock icons for the individual stroke types. And I'm going to show you how that comes into play right now. So I'm going to lock the stroke layer. I'll be on the fill layer now, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to adjust this gray fill that I've done. And notice we've been in draw mode here for all this time. Remember when we were doing 3D sculpting, we were in the sculpt mode. We were going to use the sculpt mode as well here in just a second. So the draw mode is when we're drawing lines or fills. The sculpt mode gives us the ability to sculpt what we've already drawn. Now I've locked the solid stroke, meaning the black lines layer, so I can't adjust those. But watch what happens is if I tuck and on these individual lines here, I'm using the undo tool here a little bit, I can adjust the radius and I can increase the radius. And notice what I can do is I can adjust the fill here. And again, by adjusting the radius, I can fine tune how much sculpting I'm doing. But what I'm doing is trying to fit that particular little fill within or behind that black stroke that we see here. Okay, so by using the sculpt tool, I'm able to sculpt the fill to fill in between those particular lines. Now, if I go to just the object mode here, we can see what that looks like with the strokes on top of the fills. Now, if you recall, there are different layers, and the layers can be locked or unlocked, right? So I'm going to unlock the stroke layer and lock the fill layer. Now, if I go back into sculpt mode, what I can do is I can sculpt the lines to match the fills or to do anything else I want. And so now what I'm doing is adjusting the fill, the line, the stroke, essentially, layer or material to get that stroke to match my particular fill. Okay, so what I can do is alter the line work or the fills after the fact. So even though I were to draw something in with the draw mode, I can use the sculpt mode to adjust those things later. We also have the edit mode, and when I select the edit mode, I can select individual line strokes. So each stroke is its own line, right? So I could select a stroke like this. I could copy and paste that stroke and put another duplicate somewhere. So I went Control C, Control V to make a copy. I'm going to undo that a couple times. All right. I can select by window and grab everything. Now notice I'm grabbing only the strokes. That's because I've got the fills locked, right? So I could unlock the fills and do A for select all. And what it's going to do is select all the fills. Okay, again, because I can lock or unlock individual layers and I can prevent them from being moved or adjusted with any of the tools. So that's in object mode. Edit mode, I can do that. Now under object mode, I can also move the individual thing, which in this case is the entire stroke. So the stroke is the fills and the lines and everything together under object mode. What I'm doing is editing the entire object. So the entire sketch that I've made here is considered one object.